You're listening to The Mark Cox Show. Follow the show on Facebook. Facebook.com/The Mark Cox Show.
You can bet your life. Stakes are high and so am I. It's in the air tonight.
We've heard of looting around the greater Houston area, specifically Harris County. As far as Fort Bend County, we haven't. I made a comment the other day that we support the Second Amendment here in Fort Bend County, and there are many of us that are armed. I would caution those that want to come and prey on our people here in Fort Bend County that are suffering so much right now. You may want to stay out of Fort Bend County because you could leave this county in a bag.
Wow.
Yeah. That was the county sheriff just warning people down in the Houston area, if you're thinking about looting, stay out of this county. Just like when you see the county line, turn around and go back. Because you may be leaving that county in a bag. Wow.
That was Clint Eastwood-esque, wasn't it?
I got some people fired up here on Friday, right? I'm talking about the possibility of protests after the Stockley verdict, which is something I want to get into before you leave. And somebody called in and said, well, they better not come into my neighborhood because if they're coming in here to cause problems or loot, we're going to fire on them. And I stopped the guy and said, we're not encouraging anybody to get guns out. And people are calling here all mad at me because one of my callers said that. But people feel defensive if they think their property is going to be damaged. That's no different with these looters down in Texas.
I think they saw what happened in Ferguson, where the governor and the local police just stood by and watched businesses and property be destroyed. And they're saying that's not going to happen to me.
Well, let's hope it doesn't get to that. Let me get a few calls real quick on this issue down in with DACA and this announcement today by Jeff Sessions. Steve, thanks for holding on.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Good. What's up, bud?
Hey, I want to thank you, first of all, for taking my call quick because my wife's about to choose my arm off. We were waiting to go inside to eat. I told her, just wait a minute.
How nice. You tell her we said thank you.
That's a dedicated listener.
Yeah, she's listening. Okay, so anyway, I want to make a comment on the DACA thing, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah.
And see if I'm understanding this right. Obama made this an executive decision to allow these people to come in and, as long as he's here, essentially to stay. And my understanding of executive order is a president that comes either after, obviously after, but can turn around and do away with that executive order.
Sure.
You don't need to go through court to do away with an executive order. Now, my problem that what I have with what Trump, I guess, is proposing is he's asking Congress to go through and make a law as it pertains to the DACA thing. If he's doing that, doesn't that then give validation to Obama's executive order, which then makes it more difficult to get rid of in a court?
I see your question. Well, you're probably right on that, Steve. I don't think you're inaccurate on it. And I appreciate the call, and I appreciate your wife not chewing your arm off while you were waiting. I would say that while I don't necessarily support the idea of DACA, I support the idea that if it's going to happen, it needs to be Congress that does it, right? I don't necessarily support the idea because I think it's too soon for that conversation. We have other immigration issues we need to fix first. But I think just like what we said earlier with Hasha, what Obama did was put into an executive order what had roughly been the policy that a lot of Republican and Democrat presidents had followed since the 1970s in terms of instructions to these judges on how to deal with that.
And he added to it by
giving
them work permits.
He added to it. I agree with you completely. I agree. Charles, thanks for holding on.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. What's going on?
Well, I think sometimes you believe in the rule of law, right?
Except
question.
Except when it comes to Sheriff Arpaio, but go ahead.
Well, I'm going there. You said the Constitution is 250 years old. I'm not against guns, but they had muskets back then, and now they got machine guns. So, you take that stuff, the way you want to interpret it, and then make your point out of it and create a counter-argument, and then, it sounds like somebody's doing something against the conservative way of life. And if I could just add one other thing, it's a little off subject, but if you don't, the tax cut that's coming up is like 85% for the richest people. Middle class is hardly going to get anything. In fact, some of them their taxes are going to go up. If there's no market, and I guess the money's going to the old job creation thing and trickle down, and the money's going to go to the rich, and they're going to create jobs. But where's the market going to be if nobody's got any money to spend? When I'm talking about the inadequacy of wages going up in this country.
Okay. No, I don't think that the tax cuts are only affecting the rich. I don't know what you're talking about. They're gonna expand the amount of money you have to earn before you get taxed on your first dollar, and they're gonna limit the tax categories. I don't see how everybody's not going to get a tax cut out of this. Why are you saying it's only the richest?
Well, just wait and see. Read it. Go on and cite.
Happy to.
Read what the economists have said about it. The top 1% is going to get most of it, and then the next one down, the next 5 or 10% are going to get some people that use the one thing about having a child, extra child
tax credit or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, their taxes are going to go up.
No, I don't know, Charles.
No,
I'll tell you what. I'll go read it, but the tax thing is not what we're talking about today. But I appreciate the phone call. I think that he's wrong about that.
I had a thought. I completely.
No. I think I don't know why Charles went off on taxes. The rule of law thing.
Where I was going.
Oh, go ahead.
The Democrats amaze me with their argument. They are for tax cuts when they're for the middle class. They talk about, that money filters down to the baker and the bread maker and everyone else. But why does tax cuts benefits just stop when you're wealthy?
Well, but the bottom line is that the top 10% of taxpayers in this country pay about 75 or 80% of all the taxes.
Yes.
And that's what he always wants to get away with that argument. The liberals want to define what rich is, even though they're willing to waffle on that when it comes to this whole minimum wage increase and the fact that it costs more to live in L.A. than it does in St. Louis.
I think tax breaks work for
everybody.
I mean, what they don't like is they can't make their class warfare
I would get rid of the progressive tax altogether. We don't need progressive taxes in this country. Give me I'm a flat taxer. If you make $10 million, you pay 10%. If you make $20, you pay 10%. Everybody pays the same. The guy making $10 million is going to pay a hell of a lot more than everybody else. It's just a fair system.
What are you going to do with the billion-dollar tax industry? All those people that work in that industry, the tax accountants, the lawyers.
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but I know that they're one of the folks that have lobbied the hardest against any changes to this complicated tax plan.
And that's why it'll never change.
Why it's going to be so difficult to fix. That's why it definitely is going to be so difficult to fix. Chris, before we get out of here, because I'm suspecting you guys probably talked about this on your weekend show this weekend, you and Tony, but this threat of protest, this threat of shutting down downtown and other communities and all that stuff in the light of this Stockley case, what do you make of the threat and how real it is?
I always said when this whole Ferguson deal came about that if you're going to have any social justice or protesting like that, you have to have the public behind you. In the 60s, when the civil rights movement was going on, when the African Americans were beat up on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and that was shown nationwide, that brought everyday Americans onto the side of civil rights. What they're doing, threatening violence before a verdict and all of that, you're not getting people on your side, and you're just making people angry. And it seemed like they would realize that.
No, I don't. I think in some cases, the people who are the real victims, the families of someone who's been killed, and they think that it was a wrongful shooting, whatever the case may be, they're having their grief stepped upon by folks that have other agendas, who've come in from out of town and who've decided they're going to stake their claim on this particular case. And I've heard the family of the victim in the Stockley case. Lamar,
I think.
have come out and said no. Don't We don't want any violence. We need this to stay peaceful. And I'm hearing that that's not what the protesters have in mind. Not all the protesters. I think there are going to be different groups of protesters. There'll be some who are just concerned with the social justice of it, and they want to hold up a sign and chant at somebody. And there are going to be those who've decided they need to take it to the next level by causing violence and disruptions.
Well, like I've said many times, I hope that these folks are ready, because I don't see Governor Greitens just sitting back and letting the city burn and trying to be compassionate. He's going to put force on the streets. He doesn't care about the armored vehicles and how that looks. He's going to keep order. And
yeah, well, I've thought that too, but considering the fact that this is in the city limits, the mayor and or the police chief, they're going to have to call him in, right?
I guess so. That's a good point.
Yeah, I think that Mayor Crewson would have to call in the National Guard, and I think she's going to be reticent to do that because of how it would look.
Wouldn't, though, if it just got completely out of control? I mean, doesn't the governor have some emergency power to supersede the mayors and all that? I would think.
He's probably said to her, now, Mayor, as a former Navy SEAL, this is how we have to deal with this. Don't you think? He was a Navy SEAL, right?
He was a Navy SEAL.
Heard that somewhere.
A couple of times.
Maybe a few ads. At least he's well prepared to come in and take charge and say, okay, here's the operation. You go here, you go here.
I'd like to see him
set up a perimeter.
If there is some type of conflict, or I'd like to see him out on the front lines in some army fatigues,
some BDUs. Yeah, could be. Yeah, it's possible.
With a beret on or something.
I don't think he was a Green Beret. I think he was a Navy SEAL.
See how much I know about army.
There you go.
Hey, the military.
Chris, thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Appreciate that. 314-969-9797, 866-455-9797. Still lots of folks want to talk about this Dreamers decision. We're going to get to that. In the next hour, we're going to briefly switch gears and talk a little bit about Korea and what's going on over there with Bruce Klingner, who used to be in the CIA and has a lot of experience in that area of the world, and what the real risk is of us getting into another Korean war, because there are rumors that there's another missile on a launch pad somewhere that this nut is getting ready to fire. I don't know what the reaction is going to be to that. All of that and more coming up on The Mark Cox Show.
This hour of the Mark Cox Show brought to you by Naputi Wellness, NaputiWellnessCenter.com.
So it's the middle of the night. You're tossing and turning, covered in sweat. I've been there before. You could run the AC or a fan all night, but who can afford that? Get rid of your heat-trapping mattress and sleep as coolly as the other side of the pillow like I do on my Casper mattress. Its 2 high-tech foams guarantee you sleep